Good morning and welcome to Rising. Thank you so much for tuning in. We've got a great show for you today. The funeral for former President Jimmy Carter is underway at the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. All the presidents are there, current and former, and we will be talking about that, discussing some footage from that in a little bit. But first, we will be turning to the devastating wildfires in Los Angeles. I am here with Niall Stanage, as usual. Nice to see you, my friend.
Good to see you too, Robby. How are you today?
I am just fine, thank you.
Excellent. So let's get right to the events on the other side of the nation, the wildfires. What is on your radar?
Well, wildfires are raging across Los Angeles, having destroyed more than 1,000 buildings in the Pacific Palisades neighborhood. But have no fear, Joe Biden is on it. The president flew to California on Wednesday to make an appearance with California Governor Gavin Newsom, who has been heavily criticized by conservatives for how he has handled the wildfires issue. In his remarks, Biden concentrated on his concerns that the home of his infamous son, Hunter Biden, had burned to the ground because Hunter lives in that neighborhood. They now believe the home is in fact still standing, and good. Biden also took this opportunity to make a personal announcement. Let's watch.
We got notification yesterday their home was probably burned to the ground. Today, it appears that maybe still standing, I'm not sure. But the good news is, I'm a great-grandfather as of today. I have a granddaughter, and a baby girl, a baby boy. So I remember this day for a lot of long reasons.
So that was Biden announcing the birth of his first great-grandchild, which makes him the first sitting president in U.S. history to have a great-grandchild. And look, good for him, of course, but was that press conference really the right place to express relief that everything is A-okay for Hunter? And by the way, there's a new addition to the Biden family. I mean, talk about tone deaf. Thousands of people are in danger of losing their homes. At least 5 people have died. Biden left that press conference without taking any questions from the media, of course. Now look, the president is perfectly within his rights to be happy that Hunter's house is safe and to be excited about the birth of a great-grandchild. I would be, too. But look, I'm sorry, that was a tone-deaf way to announce it. Remember when Biden was crowned the king of empathy by the mainstream media? The guy who could take care of COVID because he understood suffering and pain, could relate to Americans who were reeling from sickness and death. The presidency is, let's be frank, first and foremost a comms role. And in that capacity, Biden is just so totally out of his depths at this point. Yes, it's the end of his presidency. In just a few days, we won't be beating him up for that much longer. Maybe he's on autopilot, but never forget that a few short months ago, virtually the entire Democratic Party, the mainstream media establishment, all pretending he had the stamina to do this for another 4 years. Meanwhile, President-elect Donald Trump, soon to be President Trump, is laying the blame for the wildfires' devastation on California Governor Gavin Newsom. On Truth Social, the president-elect blamed Newsom for opposing Trump's water restoration declaration, which he says would have moved water from Northern California to these affected areas. For her part, odiously, LA Mayor Karen Bass has been away on a trip in Africa. Here she is taking questions from Sky News.
Do you owe citizens an apology for being absent while their homes were burning? Do you regret cutting the fire department budget by millions of dollars, Madam Mayor? Have you nothing to say today?
Can you back up? I appreciate it.
Have you absolutely nothing to say to the citizens today? Elon Musk says that you're utterly incompetent. Are you considering your position?
That makes Biden's handling of it look particularly spectacular by comparison. Not a lot of answers there, as you can probably see. So, what do you think, Niall, about how these two Democrats are handling the optics of the real devastation going on?
So I am going to push back on your radar, perhaps not surprisingly, because I think it is a bit unfair, more than a bit in parts. Now, as you know, I have been critical of Biden on various occasions for either him hanging on in office too long or for ineffective moments that he has had in the latter part of his time in office. But to suggest that he is tone deaf, we'll get to what Trump said in a second, but he did also say we're doing anything and everything we can, and for as long as it takes to contain these fires, and noted that it was going to take some time. What he has done in the interim is approved a major disaster declaration for California, which has concrete effects in terms of people's capacity to get aid for themselves. He has also put in place a FEMA situation which allows California to get compensated for its firefighting. The federal government has provided 5 large air tankers, 10 helicopters that are specifically equipped for firefighting, and dozens of fire engines. So I don't think that it is really fair to characterize his response as negligent or solipsistic or narcissistic simply because he happens to mention the birth of his first.
Well, maybe the policies are perfectly fine. I would, for his part, I was really just critiquing the optics of it. I would critique.
But you don't think it's tone deaf? I mean, if we're saying that Biden is tone deaf to talk about the birth of his great-grandson, we don't think it's tone deaf for Trump to use a derogatory nickname about Gavin Newsom?
I think I would certainly prefer if Donald Trump did not use derogatory nicknames for a variety of people. That has clearly ceased to faze the American people. I think it's fine to criticize, this is a state that has supermajority Democratic control, and to criticize those policies as Trump was doing, to criticize Karen Bass for, according to reports, having reduced the budget of the fire department by, I saw 2 figures, I saw 23 million and 17 million. I'm not sure which is accurate, but it is reported in a variety of you're going to say more funding for local.
I certainly welcome your conversion to robust funding.
Well, look, they gotta fund. I mean, they gotta.
A good libertarian belief. Everyone should have their own fire.
If people are paying for fire, they should get good fire service. Well, look, you could have a private fire department too, but people deserve to have this. The service is monopolized by the government. People deserve to have the service handle it well. I mean, obviously.
Well,
the government says we and we alone are going to take care of this for the people. You're going to pay tax dollars, so we will take care of it. Then there is some expectation that they actually handle it. I think that's fine.
I think it is worth noting that whether we use the 17 million or 23 million figure for Karen Bass's cuts to the Los Angeles Fire Department, the annual budget for that department is $819 million. So we're talking about a cut of about 2%. Whether that is really a pivotal change that would affect the capacity to deal with these fires in a fundamental way seems rather questionable to me. Now, there are, I think, genuine, I mean, this is obviously a disaster, and obviously there are going to be political debates around it. Some of those political debates, I think, just obscure some very obvious practicalities that political policy can't really handle. One of the reasons, as I understand it, for the shortage of water in fire hydrants or the loss of water pressure is typically you fight wildfires most effectively from the air by dropping, vast quantities of water or other suppressant. They haven't been able to put those aircraft in the air because of the winds for some of the time, which means you're then left fighting wildfires from fire hydrants, and that just fundamentally doesn't work and puts an enormous strain on the water supply. That is not something that is in any legitimate sense really a political issue.
Yeah, but that's fair, but the functioning of government in crises like this, you're right, it doesn't need to be political, but it's always made political. If it was Republicans in charge of the state and this was happening, you would get denunciations of how they're handling it. So I think it's perfectly fair. Again, and it is obviously fair to criticize the mayor for not even being there and fielding questions about it.
But did she? But she didn't go when she had gone before the fires broke out, and she then got back. Well, she is back.
Let's get on the first train.
She had
home.
to attend the inauguration of the Ghanaian president.
Very, very important to be there for that, I'm sure. Tell us what you think, and we will be back with more Rising right after this. The fact that tech entrepreneur Elon Musk is dipping his toes into overseas politics is clearly infuriating European leaders.
Members of the European Parliament are calling on the EU to investigate whether Musk's company, X, is violating the EU's Digital Service Act.
European Member of Parliament Damien Boslager told The Guardian, "I don't understand why people believe that free speech is not affected by the concentration of opinion-making power in the hands of the few. For me, that has rather illiberal autocratic tendencies rather than liberal tendencies when one voice is so much more powerful than all the others." French politician Jean-Noël Barrot hinted on a French news show that if X gets out of hand, a ban might be considered.
Talking to X, is it Barrett or Barrot? Surely it should be Barrot.
Jean-Bleu Barrot. I know what I shall do with your free speech.
I won't read his tweet in a French accent. You can imagine it for yourselves via the lens of my Irish accent. Anyway, what Monsieur Bourreau wrote was, in 2022, as Europeans, we have equipped ourselves with clear rules to protect public debate online. If the European Commission does not exercise its powers firmly, it will have to leave it to the member states that wish to take national measures. Musk, meanwhile, is set to have a space discussion with Alice Weidel, Germany's AfD party leader.
She took to X herself and wrote, "Big Brother is watching you. 150 EU officials supposed to monitor my conversation with Elon Musk." I'll leave it at that. An EU that uses, this is still her quote, its bureaucracy to exercise censorship on social media is instilling the spirit of unfreedom. The DSA threatens democracy. Top digital officials at the EU have vowed to ramp up the investigation into X that was started in 2023, according to a letter obtained by Bloomberg. I've been listening to all of the Hercule Poirot, Agatha Christie stories on audiobooks, so my French, Belgian, European accents are really top-notch.
Poirot is great. He should have a bigger audience in the United States.
Fantastic.
It's all
I feel I finished them all. I feel like I've lost my best friend. He's truly remarkable.
It is. So after this moment of comedy, I suspect we're going to have a European-American liberal versus libertarian.
Yes, because you know where I would like to tell these EU bureaucrats to stick their regulations
as they protect public spaces for the fairness of greater
fairness. I mean, their view of fairness is that they. I mean, look, but this is transparent. What's going on here? They don't like what Elon Musk has to say. They think it is harmful to the political project and to the political parties they support, and they would like it to be restricted on that way. Now, keep in mind, they began investigating X long before his recent interest in the German elections and British political stuff. They were already looking at X for a variety of reasons. Look, I think the EU is very heavy-handed when it comes to speech online. I think they are paranoid about some of the subjects that our media here in America is also worried about, but we have strong First Amendment protections, a very different norm. I think they would certainly like to put rules in place that would make it harder for you to express dissident or provocative or conservative viewpoints on social media. They think that they embrace a very large definition of what constitutes hate speech, including they will fine and eventually jail people for expressing far-right Nazi sort of views. I deplore those views. I don't think you should go to jail for them, and so on and so forth. It is a American-European split on how to handle norms of speech, and I think their way is bad and wrong. But they can go ahead with it. I guess it's their Europe.
Well, I think I think in relation to Nazi speech, I mean, you have to understand the enormous catastrophe that took place on that continent and the understandable reasons for allowing any of that opinion to gain steam and gain traction. But to the broader point here, and it's the MEP, Mr. Buschlager from Germany, who you quoted in The Guardian, where he says, "I don't understand why people believe that free speech is not affected by the concentration of opinion-making power in the hands of the few." That seems to me to be a very valid point. One of the ongoing debates or arguments that you and I have had, I think, is my belief that if you allow billionaires of whatever political disposition untrammeled power, whether it is in relation to X, whether it is in relation to election spending, whether it's in relation to funding political causes with hundreds of millions of dollars, the defense that is their free speech runs into the problem that it in effect drowns out the speech of people who do not have those means.
I mean, it is just a very philosophical disagreement, but I would say the drowning out occurs when you empower a government panel to start setting limits on what is acceptable and what is not. Elon is in increasingly unfriendly position with respect to these people because of the things he's saying, and so they would like to rein it in or cut it off. That is the greatest power of all, to use the power of the state and the power of government to sharply limit what someone is going to say. This is something X has encountered very directly in Brazil, where even I think skeptical of him liberal type people were a bit aghast at what this one judge in Brazil ordered, mass suspending of accounts and so on and so forth. Again, this is the government getting between what a person in a private capacity wants to say on the internet platform publication he owns and people who want to consume that. I mean, if he had a very large and influential newspaper and the government started saying, we think its distribution is too vast and it's concerning to us because it's so influential and so well read and we want to start cutting back its circulation, I think liberals, progressives would be aghast at that. The fact that it's the internet does not, to my mind, make it fundamentally different.
I think, though, that I am not an expert on European Commission law, but I believe that there are regulations in place there, aside from the philosophical disagreement that you and I have. I am under the impression that there are laws there that do curb social media much more.
Oh, certainly. I was arguing from a philosophical standpoint. There is no doubt that Europe has a different set of, yes, you can much more strictly regulate speech in all its forms on social media. People in the UK get ticketed and fined for posting hateful rap lyrics on Facebook. This has happened before. I've written about it a number of times. That could never happen in the US, or if it happened, you would get it, revert. You would have the ACLU and fire come to your defense, and you would get it, litigated. But it can happen in Europe because they take a different attitude towards speech.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously there are debates about this in Britain and Europe as well. But I think that one of the reasons that that the centre of gravity on this issue is different in Britain, for example, is that the freedom of speech has been utilised on occasion to, for example, misidentify, I would argue malevolently, the perpetrators of terrible crimes as immigrants or Muslims, when in fact that's not who did it. And the capacity of words or rumours or gossip like that to spur actual violence is taken very seriously there, as I think it should be taken.
Well, yeah, and I think there are limits on speech, and you should be able to use defamation, and libel law exists even in the U.S. to help hold people accountable for deliberately spreading damaging, fact-based falsehoods about you rather than just opinion. But again, the fact remains that if you believe in free speech, you probably believe in it. For both, what are these two principled? Maybe you think that the government ought not to restrict free speech, even if restricting free speech would be better for society, because you take that's just, they don't have the right to do that. I actually take that view as well. I additionally think empowering the government to restrict free speech, except in extremely exceptional circumstances, does end up being bad for society, because while you allow people to say things that are untrue and there are harms from that, the greater harm would be having a group of people empowered to make the decisions about what is allowed to be debated and what is not. And I would say that in the calamities we've seen over the last couple of years, I think my belief that no government is qualified to make these determinations has become stronger as I saw the kinds of information they tried to suppress during the pandemic. Governments would have muted criticism of China. They tried to mute criticism of China. The WHO did early on. Of the lab, of all those things, and these things ought to be debated, and And again, this goes to really the fundamental issue that Mark Zuckerberg was talking about earlier this week when he said we went too heavy-handed on the moderation. We understand now that we shouldn't do that, and that warts and all, the U.S. is a place where our tech companies are thriving because we have a more inclusive attitude about speech, and that's why the companies are headquartered here. It's also about the economic power of these important companies prospering.
The Zuckerberg debate is another one that we maybe return to some other time. I just think that you and I have an honest but quite deep disagreement on the balance between the harms, as you would see it, of restrictions from the government and the harms, as I would see it, of the toxicity and potential for actual violence stemming from hate speech or misinformation.
Well, you tell us what you think, and more Rising coming up right after this. All the living presidents were in attendance for President Jimmy Carter's funeral today at the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. President-elect Trump, President Biden, Barack Obama, George Bush, and Bill Clinton sat in the first two rows, each with their wives, that's including Hillary Clinton, although Michelle Obama was not there. She was noticeably absent. Now, for the first time since exiting the White House, Trump and former Vice President Mike Pence were in the same room. The men shook hands before taking their seats. It might be the first time that they have been meeting in 4 years. Now, in an unexpected to some people moment, Obama and Trump were actually chit-chatting at length, you can see there, before the funeral proceedings got underway. A lot of conversation between them that was noticed by many people. President Biden, accompanied by wife Jill Biden, was the last of the presidents to enter. That is, I think, Niall, very much intentional. They stagger them for the incumbent current president and the vice president sit in the front row there, and then the living presidents, former presidents behind them, and then the vice presidents behind them. So Al Gore was in the row behind with Mike Pence, and that was some of that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously a solemn moment. I think, President Carter's political legacy we could go into. I think a lot of people feel that it was his post-presidential life that really got the most universal acclaim, at least, and his presidency was more divisive. But, it is, I think, moving to most people, the kind of pomp and circumstance that goes with a funeral for any president of the United States. And I have no problem at all with, Trump and Obama making conversation in what appears to be a pretty civil and friendly way. Good for them.
No, I think it's great. And it's hard not to be fascinated, though. These are all the, the main characters of political life, the starring roles in the political extended universe, usually off in their own films, but in the same place in rare circumstances. So it is always just kind of interesting to watch them interact and, do so in very civil terms, despite all of the very disparaging things they all say about each other, Donald Trump in particular, but the others they're saying very disparaging, maybe in less colorful terms, but about him. But then they are, able to preside over this important moment for the good of the country and to show goodwill toward each other. There was a lot of talking, as we said, between Obama and Trump. I'm sure George W. Bush was disappointed that Michelle Obama was not there, because
his
those two have a particular friendship. But yeah.
Yeah, and as of us recording this, we haven't seen any, or at least I haven't seen any public explanation for why Michelle Obama was not there. Perhaps it was just some simple scheduling conflict, or perhaps she didn't particularly wish to be in close proximity to Mr. Trump, of whom she has been particularly critical. I think it is.
She could be ill. Who knows?
Exactly. There's all sorts of reasons.
Well, yeah, and I saw people saying at first that it's like X and Y didn't shake each other's hands, but you have to be. Somebody said that about Obama and Trump, but because then they shook Mike Pence's hand and Al Gore's hand, but that was just what you saw on camera. For all I know, they were in a separate waiting area before because now they're talking as if they had clearly. So people should not get over their skis about they didn't interact on. They might have interacted just before they entered the camera's purview.
No, absolutely, and I mean I get that there is always a temptation in these moments, because they are so rare, to parse the body language in very close, overly much. One of the things that I saw getting some attention on social media was a particular moment where Vice President Harris, who was seated in the row in front of Obama and Trump, looked back at them, and they were, yucking it up, and she looked back in apparent dismay. But who knows? I
mean, Trump's facial expressions are just so interesting to watch. I'll never forget the body language on. I can't remember if it was I think it was Trump's first inauguration, where Bill Clinton is very fondly watching Melania enter the area, and Hillary Clinton is following Bill Clinton's gaze and then kind of laughs to herself. It's very hard not to read what was going on there.
Human moments among our past presidents or past secretaries of state.
Yeah, look it up if you don't believe me. It's quite amusing.
So I mean, we'll say it is interesting. I think how even though Jimmy Carter was president so long ago, how there is still not only reverence for the office, but I actually went over to with a colleague to the Capitol Rotunda last night, and there was a significant line still to get in to see President Carter's casket at 7:30 on a very snowbound Washington evening. So I think that is partly about retrospective admiration for him, of course, but also reverence for the office itself.
Yeah. So Kamala and Biden, as we said, in the front row. I watched Biden's entrance. Again, he didn't particularly engage with anyone as he got to his seat. He might have engaged with them before he was brought to his seat, but he went right with Jill and sat down and is next to Kamala and Kamala's husband, Doug.
Yes, someone told me, and I need to double check this, but I believe there will be a slightly unusual circumstance at this funeral where posthumous eulogies from former President Ford and from Walter Mondale will be read out that Carter had asked them during their lifetimes to do that. So if I've got that completely wrong, people can slam me in the comments, but I certainly read that somewhere.
Very, very interesting. Well, we will continue to monitor this and the best wishes for the Carter family, of course, as they mourn a very pivotal and important person in American history, an ex-president. More Rising right after this. It's big, it's beautiful, and President-elect Donald Trump wants it.
We're going to be changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, which has a beautiful ring that covers a lot of territory. The Gulf of America, what a beautiful name.
Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum wasn't having any of that.
¿Por qué no le llamamos América Mexicana? Se oye bonito, ¿no?
This comes amid Trump's talk of all sorts of geopolitical rearrangements. He has not only talked about assuming control of Greenland and the Panama Canal.
We need them for economic security. We need Greenland for national security purposes.
He has also considered using, quote, economic force to make Canada a 51st state. In fact, this was the New York Post's satirical cover Wednesday. The Donroe Doctrine. Greenland is now our land, Canada is a 51st state. Of course, as you can see, the Gulf of America, and last but certainly not least, the Panama Canal. The House Foreign Affairs Committee majority reposted the cover but added their own little title, the Trump Doctrine. Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene is jumping on the Gulf of America train.
I directed my ledge staff to immediately draft legislation, and we are entering it right now to officially change the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. And Congress has to do this because we have to fund the name change in maps. We have to fund the name change through all types of, like the military, FAA, et cetera. And it's absolutely the right thing to do.
Wonderful. Just all wonderful.
You're delighted with this new era of American imperialism, Robby.
This is some freedom fries stuff going on here. Wait till Trump learns there's actually a state with the word Mexico in its name.
Yes.
I'm talking, of course, of New Mexico.
Yes.
I don't know how long we're going to tolerate that.
I mean, I get all the amusing elements of this. I do also think the pushback from not only President Sheinbaum in Mexico, but other figures in Canada and in Mexico are kind of amusing as well. We have Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario. He is offering to buy Alaska and Minnesota.
Oh.
And if we fancy that.
Well, those are cold places. They could be part of Canada.
Perhaps so. The Green Party leader in Canada is suggesting, or gave a press conference where she talked about how she and they in Canada had a great deal for Americans because of things like their free health care and stricter gun control laws, which of course I would find very appealing, Robby, but you less so.
Don't know about that. I will, obviously, I don't care if we rename the Gulf, and about this is how much government time I want spent on changing the names of things on maps. This is a 0, by the way. We want to be not having them waste their time.
You're not in favor of the Gulf of America, Rob?
Well, it is, but we should be clear. Like, Mexico is part of America. They didn't say Gulf of the United States. It's all America. So maybe he's just practicing some of that inclusivity that progressives are so excited about?
Well, perhaps then in that spirit, we should be open to President Sheinbaum's suggestion that it should be the whole continent should be called Mexican America or America Mexicana.
Something like that. That'd be global. The whole look. I think it is a good idea for the entire continent to have good relations, and we want to have reciprocal trade, economic kind of partnerships. We don't want to be telling Mexico how to run their country or Canada how to run their country or micromanaging Greenland contrary to the wishes of the people. Certainly not.
And you don't think that suggesting Canada should be brought into the fold as the 51st state cuts against that?
I don't think anyone in the Republican Party actually wants to do that, because then we would have to give electoral votes to communists. Canada. So we're not going to do that. It's not going to happen. But we want to get along well with Canada, and I think that's a bipartisan project to have. Now we have a lot of concerns. People on the right have concerns about illegal immigration and drug importation from both directions, and these are things that those governments of those countries need to take seriously because they impact us as well as them. But the goal to get to should be we profit from each other's resources and economic arrangements so that people can easily do business here and there, and we can enrich and prosper mutually. That's what we want. That's what we want with Greenland. We've talked about Greenland a lot this week. We talked with the writer Richard Hanania about it yesterday, and it is actually, I think you accept that it's not so ridiculous an idea to have a better relationship with Greenland, especially so that it does not become part of the Chinese or Russian, yes. But you know what I mean, orbit. It should be part of the American orbit. Again, not contrary to the wishes of the people, right. Not going to use the military to start. The imperial project is not about military domination. The appetite for the American people to have military domination is very low. We don't want to be involved in military struggles elsewhere. We don't want to send our troops elsewhere. But we want to we want to project our economic strength in a mutually sustainable, mutually beneficial arrangement with their willing participation. If they don't want us anything to do with America, then we don't want anything to do with them.
So for a start, one of the things that we do agree on is our opposition to extending American military might elsewhere, and that is a bad and often counterproductive thing for all kinds of reasons. In relation to the economic ties, yes, of course, people think there should be closer economic ties. I noticed that even Mr. Ford, the Ontario Premier that I mentioned, after he made his dig about buying Alaska and Minnesota, also noted more seriously about the importance of cross-border trade. That I'm not sure if he's talking about Canada or Ontario here, but he said that we send 4.3 million barrels of oil a day to the United States. Now, they get paid for it. I mean, both sides have an interest in that continuing. Yes. But that is obviously just one example of the importance of keeping those trade links going. I think two things that I would say. One is, in all this debate, some of it kind of jocular and other parts of it more serious, the wishes of the people of Greenland or Canada or Mexico haven't figured as large as I would like them to do. And then the second thing is whether this whole episode is Trump really engaging in one of these showman instances where he starts talking about stuff that he has no intention of doing, in the sense of producing a new bright shiny object for us all to chase after. Given that he did make promises for lots of things, reducing the price of groceries, ending the Ukrainian conflict on day one, all these kind of promises that I think will be very difficult to fulfill, certainly within the time frame he suggested he could fulfill them.
They will be difficult to fulfill. I hope he does fulfill them. I hope we certainly get a new Europe-Ukraine policy, a new Middle East policy when he comes into office in just a matter of days. Bringing the prices down, better economic relationships with our neighbors would help bring prices of many things down, like you just talked about the oil. Yeah, let's make sure that is flowing in and that we are on good footing with their government to do that, so we can bring down the cost of producing goods and services, of growing food. I'm for all that. And I definitely hope the tariff discussions don't get in the way of those kinds of things, because again, that'd be like shooting ourselves in the foot. So I like this positive conversation about a Pax Americana, a Pan Americana, And I
American
think it's great.
Mexicana,
I
indeed.
think it's great. This land is your land. This land is my land.
All the
I'm
way
all
across
for
North America.
the Dunroe doctrine,
Well,
which
fantastic.
doesn't roll off the tongue. I don't like what we're calling it.
No, exactly. We need a new name. He'd be a better expert at branding than that, really, than the New York Post would be.
We can just call it Trumpistan or something. We can. How about we name the whole continent after Donald Trump? Wouldn't you love that? Niall?
I would.
Be so happy.
The global standing of Trumpistan would be much lower than even the United States under Donald Trump's leadership.
More rising right after this. Maybe even some serious subjects. Who knows? It turns out that former Representative Matt Gaetz might be returning to politics after all.
That's right. Gaetz spoke about his potential future endeavor on his show yesterday. Let's listen.
But it is true. Yesterday, the Tampa Bay Times texted me asking if I was considering running for governor of Florida. And of course I am. I am the true Florida man, after all. There are early smoke signals that if a return to Tallahassee is in God's plan for my family, lots of Florida Republicans would be pretty excited.
Gaetz told the Tampa Bay Times in an interview published yesterday that his primary concern was the insurance crisis. I have a compelling vision for the state. I understand how to fix the insurance problem, and it's not to hand the keys to the state over to the insurance industry. If I run, I would be the most pro-consumer candidate on the Republican side.
But does he have a reasonable shot at winning, though?
Let's listen to former CNN analyst Chris Cillizza airing his thoughts on this matter yesterday.
He is beloved in the MAGA community. And I honestly think, and I know people roll their eyes at this, but I honestly think he's the front runner to be the Republican nominee for governor in 2026. And if he is the Republican nominee, well, then he's the favorite to win because Florida has moved in the direction of Republicans in a pretty significant way in the last couple elections. So yes, you could absolutely see a Governor Matt Gaetz at this time in 2027. You know, he's going to be a pretty formidable candidate, even with all the baggage he brings to the race. So if you've been following me, you won't be surprised at this, but you should take Gaetz's potential candidacy. I think he's going to run seriously.
The House released an ethics report in December alleging that Gaetz had paid for sex and for drugs.
Gaetz had resigned from Congress by then and, of course, then also decided not to move forward with his nomination to be President-elect Trump's Attorney General. Well, Matt Gaetz, our old friend, the ethics report found not only that he had regularly paid for sex, but that he had, at least on one occasion, engaged in sexual relations with a 17-year-old. He would have been 34 or 35 at that time. That, I think, speaks for itself, but, you know, to be clear, I think that is creepy behavior and also apparently illegal behavior because it is a felony under Florida law for anyone 24 or older to engage in sexual relations with a 16 or 17-year-old. I think that he is... I don't necessarily think that he will lose a Republican primary. I think he has a significant hold on that MAGA base, which is very strong. But I think that that in itself is evidence of how far the standards around public life have shifted. I'm not, in relation to private citizens' conduct, obviously I'm against 35-year-olds sleeping with 17-year-olds. Things like the use of illicit drugs or the exchange of money in relation. Well, anyway, we won't go too far down that.
Yeah, I don't care about any of those things.
Yeah, but I do think that those would clearly have been disqualifying things for anyone seeking public office in a previous era, and now apparently they're not.
Now they're not. Chris Cillizza is not my favorite commentator in the world, but he's probably right that if Matt Gaetz made a go of it, he would definitely have a shot at winning the Republican primary. Maybe he'd be the front runner. I think a lot of this very embarrassing and damaging personal behavior, which I don't care about whatsoever and would not stand in the way of my support or lack of support for Matt Gaetz, is embarrassing, however, and is not.
The 17-year-old wouldn't stand in the way of your support?
If you say that is against the law, then I would not support him. I don't know what exactly the law is in Florida.
But you would. But the fact of a 35-year-old man having sex with a 17-year-old girl in itself wouldn't disqualify him in your mind.
No. What would disqualify me would be his tax and regulation policies, I guess.
But she's underage, though.
If she's underage in the state of Florida, then yes, that would be disqualifying. You said that is underage. You said, said it's just kind of gross
Right.
But I don't know if it's illegal. I mean, the age of consent is different in different. It's 16 in some states. It's 18 in other states.
Okay.
I don't particularly care.
But you don't think that it rises to the level of such inappropriate behaviour as to be disqualified?
No.
Yeah.
I think.
Okay.
I think the tax and regulatory policies are what would disqualify if he wants to. If your mandate COVID policies would be disqualifying to me. Not again, if it would be disqualifying if you committed rape of a child because they're underage. I guess it's kind of creepy behavior. It's not ideal behavior, but I won't pretend that I care more about that than what the person's political policies are.
I believe it. Well, I believe that it falls under.
I mean, it's kind of gross to go into the exact. Well, what is it, 17 versus 18 versus 16? I mean, these are all kind of.
Well, we have to set the line somewhere to avoid juveniles being abused, I guess, is the point. In any event, Matt Gaetz is apparently going to run for, well, it seems likely that he's going to make this run. It seems likely that the party has moved to the extent that he will have a reasonable.
Well, I want to go back to this for a minute. Do you think 16-year-olds should be able to vote?
I have no objection to 16-year-olds voting.
Well, and they can get married in some jurisdictions. I think some of these, like, this is the age at which you can do this, and this is what the age at which you do this, are wildly inconsistent. And I would just stipulate one universal age of adulthood, because it seems weird to me that military, driving, drinking, getting a tattoo, getting sex reassignment surgery, marriage, consent to sex are all at different ages in different places, and there's a lot of inconsistency, which is why maybe I'm not exercised as much about, well, if you can do this at this age, you can do this at this age, I don't care.
I mean, I suppose I just think that the Florida law that stipulates that it is a felony if the other party is over 24 seems sensible to me. I would not, if an 18-year-old man had sex with a 17-year-old girl, that wouldn't be creepy.
So then it's the gap in the relationship. Is it creepy if a 25-year-old girl and an 80-year-old man have a relationship?
No, because then she's of adulthood. I mean, no one really
disputes
a 25-year-old is an adult, though. There is a debate.
It seems like we're pushing the age of adulthood further and further back, and I wonder if that is not necessarily.
I don't know. I just think there is, I think, a legitimate, though difficult, conversation to be had as to what age people are fully capable of giving their consent.
Well, fine. If you're not an adult till 25, then I guess you shouldn't be voting, drinking, driving, or joining the military until you're 25. What I'm saying is just tell me what the age is, and it should probably be across the board.
But the argument in the case of the Florida law is to protect young girls who are 16 and 17 from much older men, who, as a general rule, I think, there is a greater suspicion of predatory behavior with a much older man and a 16 or 17-year-old girl than there is of an 18-year-old boy and a 17-year-old girl. I don't think that's an unreasonable.
So if the genders were reversed, you would not think that law should exist? I mean, these are interesting philosophical debates.
No, would I think that it was fair for a 35-year-old woman to sleep with a 17-year-old boy? I would think that was equally creepy. Yeah, I mean, we see now increasing cases of female teachers being done frequently for having sex with male pupils, and I think that is predatory behavior.
Yeah, I just want one. I just want to know what one standard is, and it keeps getting pushed back to this is when you're adult, you're this innocent baby being taken advantage of, but you can join the military and you can you can drive a car and you can do all these other things, and I feel like we're making a permanently. If we're not expecting that you're a fully rational adult until well into your 20s, when that was historically that has not been the case, I don't know why that's.
Who would have thought Matt Gaetz would have led to such philosophical discussions? I do note that
people are going to be screaming at you, creep. You want teenagers? I'm not saying any of that. Maybe it's creepy. I just don't. I see a lot of inconsistency in these age things, and it's weird to me. Yeah, my producers are telling me that I utterly disgust them. So we will wrap there. More Rising right after this.
I'm not going to have time for retribution. We're going to make this country so successful again. I'm not going to have time for retribution. And remember this, our ultimate retribution is success.
Fox News is planning to open up an investigation over claims that a network insider fed questions to then-candidate Donald Trump's team ahead of that Iowa town hall held last January. The moderators were Bret Baier and Martha MacCallum. These initial allegations come from political reporter Alex Eisenstadt's forthcoming book, Revenge, the inside story of Trump's return to power. Eisenstadt is a national political reporter for Politico. Eisenstadt writes, quote, about 30 minutes before the town hall was due to start, a senior aide started getting text messages from a person on the inside at Fox. Holy S, the team thought. There were images of all the questions Trump would be asked, and the planned follow-ups down to the exact wording. Jackpot. This was like a student getting a peek at the test before the exam started.
Eisenstadt further claims the president-elect was angry because he felt the questions were intended to put him on defense, but having the answers beforehand allowed Trump's team to, quote, workshop the answers, again, according to that reporter.
In another bombshell revelation, the book reveals that Fox News anchor Maria Bartiromo was floated to be Trump's running mate. The president-elect was apparently keen on this idea until his team talked him out of it. Communications Director Stephen Chung didn't address the claims in the book, saying instead that Trump has been the most transparent president. In a statement to Rising, Fox News said, quote, while we do not have any evidence of this occurring, and Alex Eisenstadt has conveniently refused to release the images for fact-checking, we take these matters very seriously and plan to investigate should there prove to be a breach within the network. If true, the allegations come after Trump's campaign slammed CBS's 60 Minutes for editing and then airing the abridged version of its October interview with then Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris. Trump railed against the network, even threatening to sue CBS. CBS cut portions of Harris's answer to a question about the war in Gaza in its initial broadcast, but it later provided a full transcript of her remarks online.
So this is a serious issue, and I'm sure Fox News is taking it seriously and says they do not necessarily buy these claims because they are, they're sourced to anonymous sources. We don't have the names of the person who provided it or who received it, as far as I can tell, in the book. Don't have those screenshots repurposed. It might be the case. If it is the case, I'm sure it was contrary to the wishes of Martha MacCallum and Bret Baier, who are both journalists I know and like and esteem. I've been on with Martha before. It is, of course, conceivable that there was a leak by someone somewhere along these lines, and it's good of them to investigate whether this did occur. I don't necessarily believe that it did occur. It could have, but we have not been shown the explicit evidence of that happening, and I think there is an over-reliance on anonymous people in these cases, but if it did happen, that's wrong, and they should get to the bottom of it.
I think it's a credible report from a credible reporter. Alex Eisenstadt is a very good reporter. I totally agree with your point that it is not something that Bret Baier or Martha MacCallum would have endorsed or wanted to happen, and to be fair to Fox, who I'm critical of in various other ways, the suggestion, even if true, is not that at some official level of the network it was like we're going to tell Trump the questions in advance. Having said all that, it is a very serious journalistic breach if anyone on the production team for that town hall forwarded the questions and follow-ups and information to the Trump team. You don't do that.
If somebody did that, they should be fired, absolutely. I'm sure they will be if Fox determines this did take place and find out who did it, because the sharing of questions with candidates has been a issue previously. I believe there was accusations that, help me out, who got the, was it, I don't want to say was it Donna Brazile?
It was Donna Brazile. Was it Hillary? Was that a primary?
It was for Hillary
debate?
Clinton for the debate against
Was that
Bernie?
I think that was a Bernie Sanders.
I think I remember Bernie Sanders people being very justifiably upset about it. So that is my. Maybe you can say a few words as I Google it.
I'll filibuster here, Robby, while you verify what we're saying is actually correct or not. But look, whoever it comes from, it is obviously wrong to give a political candidate advance warning of questions. Now, the thing that I would say here is that I expect lots of conservatives will have very little to say about this because it is Fox and Trump, and that is a constituency that is often in instantaneous high dudgeon, if there is any suggestion at all of quote-unquote liberal media favour being shown toward Democratic candidates.
So yes, it was Donna Brazile in a Hillary Clinton town hall. The questions were shared beforehand, and she said that she admitted that and said that she regrets sending those emails was a mistake. I will forever regret. My job was to make all our Democratic candidates look good, and I worked closely with both campaigns to make that happen. Yes, that was fairly outrageous.
Now, I happen to know and like Donna Brazile, but that quote is interesting in the sense of not her specifically, but the use of political strategists on news networks, because she says there, if that quote is correct, if I heard it correctly, it's my job to make all our candidates look good. And I'm not sure that you can wear that hat while being a political analyst for a news organization either, you know?
Yeah. That was pretty bad. So they should definitely get to the bottom of this and see how that might have happened if it did happen. I don't know this reporter. You seem to know him, and I don't like his work. I'm not also calling him a liar. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I would like to see
the book. Apparently is based on more than 300 interviews. I don't know Alex Eisenstadt personally, but I find his work reputable, and so I assume it's a serious piece of work. It's not some attempt just to blacken the name of Fox News. Now, that being said, of course, they have the right of reply and they have the right to look into it. But
I mean, if this person just gave them the questions without any guarantee of their own privacy being kept, they could share that. Then the person telling this to the reporter could share that name. I would.
Sorry, I lost track.
Well, the story is that the Trump campaign got the questions received them via text. Did they know who sent them to them is the question. Right. And if they do they have no obligation to keep that person's name secret?
No, but they don't necessarily have a motivation to make the person's name public either.
Well, but I guess they had enough of a motivation to tell this political reporter that this occurred. I don't know why say it occurred, but I'm not going to tell you who did it.
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll see. I mean,
things happen when you're interviewed at great length.
I think the point that I hearken back to is credible report, serious journalistic breach involving Fox News. We'll see whether people on the right who purport to be so concerned about media fairness have anything much to say about it at all, or if they just sweep it under the carpet and go back to lambasting the ladies of The View, who we both love, I know.
Well, but Fox has said they will take action if they find out who did it. I mean, did Donna Brazile suffer any negative hiring consequences? Maybe she did. I don't recall.
I don't think she's with CNN anymore, right? Isn't she somewhere else now?
She's been a commentator on virtually every network at some point.
I don't know. I'm not sure whether sanction was taken against her or not. I honestly can't remember.
Stay tuned. More Rising right after this. Breakfast Club host Charlamagne Tha God has been hitting Dems hard.
He even believes they could learn a thing or two from President-elect Donald Trump's brash approach to politics. Let's listen.
Donald Trump shows me what's politically possible. Trump shows me what presidents can do if they want to do it. Donald Trump shows me what can be said if you are willing to say it. It's not about what can't be done. It's about who has the political will to do it. I don't want to hear a peep from Democrats about nothing until they get the say what's really on their mind in regards to this country and this world. Trump doesn't care if it sounds ridiculous. Trump doesn't care if it makes sense. It's no political correctness whatsoever. As I've been saying for years, the language of politics is dead, and Donald Trump killed it, period.
Within the past week, Trump has amped up his brash calls for acquiring Greenland, the Panama Canal, and even Canada. Let's listen.
I can't assure you, you're talking about Panama and Greenland. No, I can't assure you on either of those two. But I can say this, we need them for economic security. The Panama Canal was built for our military. I'm not going to commit to that now. It might be that you'll have to do something. Look, the Panama Canal is vital to our country. It's being operated by China. China. And we gave the Panama Canal to Panama. We didn't give it to China. Canada and the United States, that would really be something. You get rid of that artificially drawn line, and you take a look at what that looks like, and it would also be much better for national security. Don't forget, we basically protect Canada.
Yeah, it seems pretty clear that Donald Trump's brash style, whatever you want to call it, has caused him very little negative political consequences, and in fact is what a lot of people like about him. You can even say it's a political strength. He has just succeeded in the most remarkable political comeback in history, not by being less brash at all, although I would say that he is somewhat more, a little bit more disciplined in certain ways, maybe not in his calm strategy, but he is certainly capable of being gracious in victory at times, turning the other cheek with those who have, his running mate is someone who once called him Hitler. Yeah. There is forgiveness for people who fall in line, but the big, bold idea, it's true that big, bold ideas like, acquiring Greenland somehow are not hurting him in the American people's eyes, and in fact, I would say that's appropriate because I think there is something, there's a kernel, or maybe more than a kernel, of wisdom in the idea of having more connectedness and trade with our neighbors. Now, would this work for Democrats is the question. Charlamagne Tha God is saying that Democrats should be more unscripted, more politically incorrect, more trash talking. I think all that stuff, I think that's true. You could certainly increase your favorability with conservatives if you did that. John Fetterman is by far the most popular Democratic figure, one of the most popular Democratic figures with Republicans, maybe not so with the progressive or the left. Right. So the question becomes, do you just lose people who are reliable Democrats who are turned off by that kind of thing? I think it's a little bit, I don't think the Trump style neatly exactly translates to Democrats.
I don't actually think it neatly translates to anyone other than Donald Trump. I mean, you might remember back in the 2016 primary, I guess it must have been, Trump was doing his usual thing and Marco Rubio tried to take a leaf from his book and made some remarks that seemed to be suggestive about manhood. And it didn't go well for Rubio because it was perceived that he was inauthentically getting down in the muck with Trump and that it just backfired on him. Charlamagne Tha God's point, it seems to me, is about how Trump has been able to move the parameters of acceptable debate. And I think that is something that right-wing populists love and that liberals feel a kind of revulsion for, or at least a very strong opposition to. And so something like the famous elevator ride in, it would have been 2015, before the 2016 election, where Trump, launching his campaign, started talking about Mexico sending rapists over the border and language like that. That was, at the time, considered to be disqualifying for a candidate. It was never going to work. A short time after that, there were the remarks that Trump made about John McCain being a prisoner of war in Vietnam. And again, lots of us in the media said, well, that's never, you can't survive that in a Republican primary. And Trump survived all of those things. The John McCain issue was a bit of a one-off, but the immigration debate and the rhetoric around immigration has plainly moved in Trump's direction, partly because of the force of his rhetoric. I think some of that rhetoric is highly dangerous, poisoning the blood of our country, for example, even as I think some Democrats have been caught too far to the left on immigration.
Well, yeah, look, not absolutely everything he's ever said did he suffer no consequence for whatsoever, at least in the short term. The McCain remark did hurt him, I would argue, with conservatives. It was covered very negatively by conservative media, and there was a lot of criticism of him for saying it by Republicans. Certainly the things he said about the election and on January 6th was, at that time, heavily scrutinized and criticized, including by Republicans and many in conservative media. Over time, that criticism certainly went mute, to say the least.
I'm asking this as a genuine, not a smart-ass question. Yeah. Do you think that, I mean, he survived all those things?
Well, he survived it, but he would have been in better, even better shape if he'd never said the thing about McCain during the primaries. It was not enough to, it was not a fatal wound, and maybe it wasn't even a significant wound, but it was not, it did not increase his poll numbers or improve with conservatives to say that. Mm-hmm. Same thing about, January 6th. That was the low point of his chances for ever being president again, but he did enough other things right to overcome that. Sure. Is what I would argue. I could be wrong, well, that's just my take.
No, that's fair enough. I think Charlamagne's argument, getting back to the Democratic side of it, is the idea that if you put your views with sort of Trumpian vigor, then you would rally people to the cause. Now, that argument is not without evidence, I would say. I mean, Bernie Sanders had some appeal beyond the traditional Democratic coalition. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez probably doesn't necessarily, but is very, very popular with that left-wing element. But I'm not sure that either of them are really Trumpian figures. When Charlamagne talks about political correctness and going against political correctness, I don't really know how that would look. Like, what would be an example of Democratic policies that would cut against that? I'm not really sure what that would mean,
right.
Unless he's just talking about you should blast Republicans with the same vigor as Trump blasts Democrats, which doesn't necessarily seem a great
I mean, if he's
road
specifically talking about political correctness, we can look at things like AOC taking her pronouns out of her bio, or the just comms tweaks that could make Democrats more relatable to the rest of America, not saying Latinx, those kinds of microaggressions, safe spaces, trigger warnings, those academic campus concepts that so pervaded Democratic elite media, if not the party itself.
NPR language, as James Carville told myself and our friend Amber.
Yes, that was a terrific interview you guys did. Look, he's got a lot of, I think, you probably have some policy disagreements with him, but I think from a comms perspective, he has a lot of good things to recommend.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that I think that Democrats are kind of at a bit of a loss or in a bit of a scramble right now, having lost the presidential election to Trump and not failed to take the House back and, as expected, lost the Senate. There's this sort of grappling for a way forward. And, do you go sort of economically populist about minimum wage and increased provision of healthcare? Do you shear off some of the identity politics stuff like you were talking about, the pronouns and the Latinx idea? Or was the election really primarily driven by that small sliver of voters in the middle who were annoyed about inflation, about the economy, had a general feeling of aggravation and wanted to throw the people who were in power out of power?
Well, the good news for Democrats is they get another shot in 4 years, and Donald Trump will not be on the ballot that time, which I would have previously argued could have been a Republican advantage, but now Trump runs ahead of the other the Senate candidates in this most recent election. He's more popular than the rest of the party by several measurements, and so without him, we'll see. It could be that the exact magical formula is solely unique to Donald Trump and no one else can quite pull it off. I think that's perfectly plausible, but we will have to wait a couple of years to find out.
And your fellow Michigander Gretchen Whitmer will finally be elevated to President of the United States.
Oh dear. Terrifying. Well, we've got more to come on Rising later today. Please stay with us. Biden has been making moves to safeguard issues that Democrats hold dear from the incoming Trump administration.
Biden blocked offshore drilling across a number of coasts and announced $500 million in Ukraine aid this month.
In 2024, the president issued a rule making it harder to fire federal workers, a protection from Elon Musk and Vivek's Doge, apparently, and now another lucky group will be getting the president's generous helping hand.
If you're one of the about 2,000 grizzly bears in 4 lucky Rocky Mountain states, you're in the clear.
Biden administration has decided to keep endangered species protections for these grizzly bears.
Now, ranchers who encounter bears outside the protection zones can shoot the bears if they attack the ranchers' livestock.
Some Republicans are speaking out against this. House Committee on Natural Resources Chairman Bruce Westerman said in a statement, the only reasonable announcement by the U.S. FWS today would have been a total delisting of the grizzly bears in these ecosystems. U.S. FWS is blatantly ignoring science in their decision by hiding behind bureaucratic red tape. Their decision endangers communities, especially farmers and ranchers, who live under the threat of grizzly bear attacks.
Republican Congresswoman Harriet Hageman wrote on X, "This proves what we have been saying for so long. The ESA has little to do with recovering and protecting endangered species and everything to do with land use control and limiting access to and use of our natural resources." Why do Republicans hate grizzly bears, Robby? An iconic animal in the American history.
I don't think they hate grizzly bears. They hate property rights being trampled by not just the bears themselves, but the heavy hand of the federal government. Look, I don't have much expertise on this subject whatsoever, but I would say that if there is a need...
There's a reason not of a grizzly bear correspondent?
Well, I'm sure we do. I'm sure I could ask one of my coworkers about it, and they would give you a more satisfying answer. But I would say if there is an urgent need to protect the grizzly bears, the way to go about it would be have preferably local lawmakers craft some policy rather than a last-minute dictate from a soon-to-be ousted president declaring it this way. Where's so you have your stand your ground rights against grizzly bear? Like if the bear attacks first, then you can do something. And that doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but
if the bear
what
attacks
do I know?
livestock or dogs, you can attack. But other than that,
if bears attack my dogs, they're going to get killed regardless of what the law says.
All those grizzlies roaming the affluent neighborhoods of Washington.
Well, what do we have? We have deer here everywhere.
They're very lovely. They should be protected too.
No, they should be mowed down indiscriminately. We would be overrun by deer. It's even worse in my native state of Michigan. There are deer and you are not only allowed but sanctioned. You are encouraged to, under certain circumstances, to kill the deer because they would take over and they become hazards for people on the roads. It's very scary driving roads at night in areas where there's way too many deer. They try to jump across. People die in horrific car accidents because of deer. So there is. Look, I like animals. I am for humane treatment of animals. I have a lot of moral objections to factory farming and all the like. I don't want animals tortured or horrifically mutilated. I am perfectly happy to consider protections for them and protections for endangered species, but animal life itself, protecting it at all costs, is, to my mind, is not humanist. In fact, it's anti-human. And the environmental protection policies for animals have a lot of unintended consequences. This I have read about in my own magazine. You have an environmentally protected, let's say, I don't know, it's a species of bee or something, and you find the beehive for this very sacred bee on your property. The first thing you're going to do is discreetly exterminate all the bees that you can find on your property.
Perhaps you'd inform the government so they can protect the bees.
No, you're right. You're never going to do that because they're going to come in and nationalize your property or do whatever. Yeah. No, you will. It encourages you to murder on sight, to take out all these animals because you don't want the feds coming in and telling you what you can do on your own property. So there's a bit of unintended consequences. There are examples of this happening over and over again where because of what the protections will mean, there's a human incentive to then kill the animals.
You're having quite a spectacular day here between the Matt Gaetz segment and now your kill Bambi kind of approach to the deer population.
I'm moving further and further to the right with each passing day. What can I say?
So look, here, let me just speak up on behalf of the grizzly bear population. Yeah. The reason that they're protected in the first place was that they were in very serious peril of becoming extinct. In 1975, when this protection was imposed or put into place, there were only 700 to 800 grizzlies in the lower 48, Robby. A sad scenario for us all. Now the population has increased, and some expert quoted in one of the stories about this was saying that the United States has spent somewhere between $30 and $45 million buttressing the grizzly bear population. And we can't just let all that good progress with our grizzly friends fall away and have them fall into endangered status again.
Can't we? No, I don't. You're adopting like the nature is healing, mankind is the disease kind of attitude here. It's like I think we should use our power for good in the planet and make reasonable accommodations for animals because we like animals and we want to. Again, I don't like torturing animals. I think there should be restrictions on that. I don't think keeping animals or animal populations alive at all costs is a reasonable thing, and environmental activist groups go way too far in that. I mean, can we have designated preserves for them, or like zoos? Zoos are fine and nice, and then you get to see and interact with the grizzly bears, and that's nice. It's better for them than the harshness of the wild. It's absolutely better for them.
Grizzly bears are much happier roaming in the wild than their grizzly bear thing.
That's not true. That's just absolutely not true.
I think
no.
in confinement, you would not
every
like to be confined behind a wire and be fed straw.
Because I'm not an animal, I'm a thinking, rationing being. But every
We're
animal
all
in the wild,
mammals,
this is a misconception that anti-zoo people have that really bothers me. What animals do in the wild is seek the exact kind of security and protection and accommodation that a zoo or a preserve provides. The wild is not fun. The wild, you watch videos, you can see them of like animals being horrifically torn apart. You know, the zebra and the gazelle getting eaten alive by lions, and you're like, oh, that's what they like. They're in wild. They're so happy. No, they would love the protections that we afford and offer them to the extent that they can.
Is that a mildly anti-libertarian position?
No, it's not.
Shouldn't you let the animals roam to do as they wish?
The animals don't have free will. They don't have the same level of rights that we do. Okay. They are ours to do with what we will. Now they provide us with enjoyment and learning and education, and so they are a value that should be taken care of. They're a resource. They're not a thinking, rationing being with the same rights that human beings have. They have a limited amount of rights in that they should not be gratuitously tortured and subject to pain because they can feel pain, etc. The more thinking creatures among them deserve even more protection. You know, bugs versus manatee or whatever is a spectrum that we can debate, and we're having really philosophical discussions on Rising today.
We are.
I'm informing the viewers more of my perhaps insane to them viewpoint, but that's my attitude. They don't not want the zoo. Release them into the wild. You know what happens to them? They die painfully.
I think that one of the advantages here is that the grizzly bear population is booming, and thanks to President Biden, it is going to continue to do so, using the powers of big government for good and protecting the bears.
Lions, tigers, bears, oh my indeed. Well, that thankfully does it for us today on Rising. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the show. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we're now available anywhere that you can find podcasts. Does it for us for the week, but Amber Duke will be bringing you Rising Fridays tomorrow. Stay tuned.